springtime is here, and today is my latest edition of April Showers Bring May Flooding. Hi, I'm Chris May, host of This Day in Weather History, a podcast from the Weather Network in Canada. It's sad but true. We're going to do it again here today because back in 2017, the interior experienced the worst flooding ever. And they were talking about this one in the Okanagan for months after this happened, this day in weather history. On May 4th of 2017, a massive storm rolled through the valley, bringing so much rain that Mill Creek spilled its banks and nearby homes and businesses were totally flooded out. As a result of this, on May the 6th, this day in weather history, a state of emergency was called for Kelowna and West Kelowna. By this point, various other creeks in the central Okanagan had flooded and had now spilled their banks, and numerous evacuations were implemented along with several road closures. But in all the research I did to breathe new life into this very important weather-related story that needed to be told, I couldn't ignore that every source focused on a common thread: how the community came together to get through this nightmarish flooding. As water levels kept creeping up, residents were seen selflessly wading through the knee-deep waters to pitch in wherever they could. They were trying to help others in need and at the same time get a jump on cleaning up as much of the damage as possible. It was a testament for how strong community spirit can be when in a time of true need. It was agreed that if it wasn't for the help of local neighbors, many residents would have been far, far worse off. Remember that this day in weather history can be enjoyed a number of ways. Right now, you are listening to the full version of today's story on your favorite podcast provider, but there is also the daily podcast video short. They are shot right here in my podcast recording studio, so you get that perspective, and oftentimes they will include visuals from that day's event, from when it happened, in weather history. So after listening to the full story, go check out the podcast video short on television or online anytime at theweathernetwork.com/weather history. Okanagan lake levels really began to rise as the winter's snowpack melted at the high elevation areas around the valley, and that runoff into the valley had a run-on effect on the lake as they progressed throughout the rest of the month of May. However, this was finally only after being battered by wind and flooding waters. Only then did things ease off, but not until June as water levels started to decline. It took a long time. Okanagan lake levels did not significantly drop for the first time until June the 10th. But before it did a ton of damage and sadly claimed lives. The day before the state of emergency was declared, on May 5th, a local fire chief was swept away by a swollen waterway in Cache Creek near Kamloops. Elsewhere in the immediate vicinity, a mudslide near Salmon Arm completely buried the home of an elderly man. But when the local states of emergency were declared in Kelowna, West Kelowna, the Fintry Delta, and Lumbee, it enacted the ability for authorities to now order evacuations. And that resulted in around 100 homes in Kelowna and 90 homes in Fintry pulling up stakes and getting to safety. It was estimated by the Regional District of Central Okanagan that 300 people evacuated their homes. This was an open and shut case for what happened here. The British Columbia River Forecast Center said on May 6th that, quote, snowmelt and thunderstorms over the past several days has led to significant stream flow across the region. So with that said, let's look at some numbers. River discharge. How much water was flowing? 218 cubic meters per second flowed at West Kettle River at Westbridge on May the 6th. Also on this very same day in weather history, 300 cubic meters per second flowed through the Granby River near Grand Forks, and that was what's called a 5-year flow. It gets worse. 45 cubic meters per second pounded through the Salmon River at Falkland. That was a 20-year flow. It was another 5-year flow at Salmon River near Salmon Arm when 45 cubic meters per second went charging through that river. And it was 325 cubic meters per second that went stampeding through the Nicola River near Spence's Bridge. That too was a 20-year flow. And in the 300 people that were evacuated from central Okanagan from May 5th to 8th, it claimed the lives of 2 people. Thank goodness they ordered that evacuation this day in weather history. Tomorrow is May the 7th, and I want to hit on a story that I had the unique opportunity to learn about where it actually happened. It was in 1902 when the French island of Martinique's Mount Pelée began the deadliest volcanic eruption of the 20th century. What resulted is what I got to see evidence of every week for 3 years. Yet, to talk about it on this podcast still brings chills. That's tomorrow, on This Day in Weather History, with me, your host, Chris May.